Has Andrea Berta signed yet? I need to know if it's time for me to be mad at him for not signing anybody for Arsenal. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name's Elliot Smith, the Block Man, Twitter, Yank Gunner. Yeah. How am I supposed to be mad at Andrea Berta for not getting his checkbook out, for not signing anybody, for not getting contracts signed, if he hasn't even signed as our director of football yet? So we will hold the fort, hold the phone, hit pause on our Berta criticism. But the scathing critique of Berta is coming just as soon as he signs on to be our director of football. All kidding aside, we did go deep with an athletic expert on Andrea Berta on the Patreon, and it is, I think, one of the more informative pods we've done in a long, long time. So I think you would like that. Let's just say it's better than the regular nonsense we put out. We did do a power rankings episode on the Patreon where we also predicted who's going to finish in the top 5. And we did just do with Clive a scouting video of Zubamendi and Adam Wharton, comparing and contrasting the two, looking at Zubamendi's qualities, and then looking at why Adam Wharton is better and why we should all be depressed that we're signing the wrong guy. I kid, or do I? You know how you find out? You watch the scouting video. You can also listen to the scouting video. And if you're an Apple subscriber, by the way, we give you those scouting videos and a hidden super secret link. It's a super secret link. So secret, I just told you about it now. But you do have the access to the videos there. So you can sign up on the app or you can sign up on Patreon. $2.50 for the first month with code AVP. I mean, like, it's $2.50, which, depending on the day of the week, literally, what are you going to do? Buy half an egg? Or are you going to listen to all of our great content all month? Think about it that way. What has half an egg ever gotten you versus 5 or 6 episodes of the ArsenalVision podcast a week? I kid, but only slightly. But is the crumbling state of the world a laughing matter? You be the judge. We do love you. Thank you so much for being here. I am away on vacation next week, but there will be no disruptions. Nay, there will be eruptions of content. We will have all the regular content for you despite me going away. I didn't want to go away. Don't want to go on vacation. I want to be with you because I love you. But nay, I do have to go and maybe get healthy. And then when I get healthy, I can come back and wreck my health by staying up night and day to get you to help us raise money for children in the Zaatari refugee camp who need your help. It's coming in April again. If you want to be a part of it in a special way, if you want to give more, if you have something you think you can do to help support that, please email me, contact@arsenalvisionpodcast.com. I want to hear from you. I want to work with you. We want to work together. The club are super invested this year. I'll explain why, because there's a lot of big things happening down there. We've got Mikel asking you to give. We've got players asking you to give. We got lots of cool stuff to talk to you about. Seats to games to give away. Sadly, not the Real Madrid game, but that's okay. You don't want to be there because it's just going to be a boring 2-0 victory, home 2-0 victory away. Easy peasy, and on we go to face Villa in the next round. So anyway, lots of good stuff. Just 3 minutes of nonstop waffle. And here with me now for the next 57 minutes of waffle is Paul. Hello, Paul.
Woohoo! Wow, Ellie. I really enjoyed that.
Did you?
I did, yeah. I don't know. Are you on some kind of meds for your illness?
Yes. Yep. Cocaine. Apparently very good for headaches and pneumonia. At least that's what my drug dealer said. I'm kidding. I'm not on cocaine.
I would recommend
do cocaine.
You're doing great on it.
Don't do cocaine. I'm on a lot of coffee. That you could probably tell. See, here's the problem, right? I'm taking all this Mucinex and stuff, this stuff that makes you feel groggy. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'll counteract that with caffeine. The other thing I think people are going to catch on to here is, right, normally we record the pod as early in the morning U.S. time to align to the calendars of those prima donnas over on the other side of the ocean, and also to not interfere with our jobs because we actually have those, as sad as it makes me. I'm not a morning person, but as you can tell, I do come alive as the sun starts to set, which is what's going on as we record this now. So things could get interesting. Paul, let's start with this.
The joke. I got a little joke.
Oh, yeah, bring it. What's your joke?
Pneumonia. It's getting old pneumonia.
Is that a joke, would you say? You understand what a joke is, right?
Can I borrow your meds? I'm not funny.
Yeah. You need some of that stuff that my doctor gave me. My quote doctor, unquote. Look, just because I found him in an alley doesn't mean he's not a doctor. He had a lab coat on and everything. Okay, so let's take some headlines. We're going to actually talk about a serious topic in a minute, but I don't want to start with that because of the levity that's going on right now. So we'll talk about something a little funnier. Gabriel Magalhães to Al Nassr. Explain why I shouldn't be worried about this.
No, I think you should be.
Oh, for real? Great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Who knows? Here's it's one of the things when a player comes into the club. I Maybe we all feel this. I always feel I have an insight I get when players come in. It doesn't matter who there is. Now, very often it's wrong, I guess, but I don't really remember those. I think
Does that make an insight then or delusion?
It's probably a delusion. It feels
Fair
like
enough.
insight though. That's the thing about delusion, right? Here was my insight about Gabriel Magalhães when he joined us. I remember he was interviewed. I remember he talked about something. He had the shirt. He was at Arsenal. He looked great. It was a big move for him. And in his kind of intro interview, he says something about moving on to Real Madrid and a couple of other clubs. His dreams, and like he didn't quite say it like that, but that's what I took it. I'm like, hang on, you're just holding we're a great club, but he was talking about this. So I have always had him down that he maybe has that kind of wanderlust, that star thing. He wants to play for a star, that he needs, that there's a big status thing with him. And you might look at Saudi and say, well, that's not Real Madrid. But depending on how you measure status, I assume they would throw a lot at him. And the fact that he was it seemed like a really real thing last summer for no good reason, right? It shouldn't have been a thing last summer. We had a great season. He had a great partnership with Saliba. I kind of put it down to Saliba getting the big contract, all the attention, all the whatever, all the fuss about him. And I have this worry that won't go away. Now, remember, Elliot, I'm always the guy who says, oh, money, players don't care about money. Billionaires, they're only in it for the love of owning our club. Saka, he doesn't care what we offer him, he'll sign him. That's how people at least hear how I talk about these things. So for me to say this means it's very, very serious, Elliot. I think there's a lot for him to have changed his feelings on things. Obviously, he's been fantastic this year. He's probably been our star centre back of the two of them. I didn't always think that I always loved him. I think many of us loved him. I think we all were surprised but rated him. I didn't know that he had other ceilings to break through in terms of his ability, but for me, he has substantially stepped up. And here he is in a backline that's probably as good as any backline in the world, depending on who we put at left back, I would say. And if you put Declan Rice at DM, you have a world-class back half to your field. David Ryan goal. It's like, why would you change that at this particular time? So I'd like to think, but you see where I'm going with that. I'd like to think that we have moved beyond that with him, at least for the time being. But I do have more than I do with most players. Most players, I'd be telling you, it's all going to be fine. The club will. I have this, and I think the club should and will work it out. But I do have that niggling concern because it should never have been a thing last summer.
The summer before last, but yeah.
Summer before last. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do sort of wonder if some of this is agent-led at this point, knowing that this summer is a critical moment for the contract negotiation with him. His contract expires.
Which I would love.
2027. Yep. I think it is very clear we have to get him on a new deal this summer, and he's earned it. And if Thomas Partey goes and Jorginho goes and one or two others go, I mean, we're going to have some people we have to buy who are going to be expensive on wages, but our Champions League money is increasing. We have a very reasonable wages to turnover ratio that we can stand to expand just a bit. I don't see any limitation to giving him a big, big sum, putting him on parity with Saliba, or maybe even raising Saliba a bit too, getting an extra year out of him, and putting Gabriel on a bigger wage. I just wonder how much he cares about playing for Brazil, because I think if that is an aspiration for him, he plays for Brazil now. And I think he will continue to play for Brazil while he plays for a top European side. Once he goes to Saudi, I don't know that that will still be the case. Will he have entrenched himself in the Brazil setup enough to just be expected to get a place there? I don't know. By the way, I think a great measure of a manager is how many players that manager gets into the national team thinking. Players that weren't there before. You look at Miles Lewis-Skelly, obviously getting his England call-up. Ethan Nwaneri will, of course, go on to become a senior England player. Obviously, because Saka's been a star there. Declan Rice was before he arrived, so a little different. Ben White's going to go back to being in the England team. Saliba in
I
the
was
France
actually
team.
calling. Yeah, I was calling for Arteta to be fired. You'll remember after Ben White got kicked out of the England team. So I'm with you
As
on
were
this.
we all.
It's a
Say
good
we all.
metric.
Yeah. It is a good metric. If they lose their place in the national team, then the manager should be fired.
Yeah.
Sack that guy. So yeah, I would say if Gabriel has aspirations to be a big player for Brazil, if he wants to be a big player in the world in the global game, I think the combination of the money you can make in sponsorship deals and things like that, being Brazil's starting center back and playing in an English top team and top 5 league and playing in the Champions League, I think you could probably add that on top of the improved wages he gets and probably get close to what he would make in Saudi. So I don't know that. Maybe I'm just out of my mind. If you offer to treble someone's wages, like of course their head's going to turn. But I'd say it this way, Paul. I'm actually more relaxed about it now because I think we will offer him a wage that puts him near the top of the game and commensurate with what Saliba's making. I think he seems to have a really good relationship with Saliba, likes being in the Brazil team. And for right now, he doesn't have to make this move. There's no need for him to make this move right now.
And the thing is, he is Brazilian, so he's a natural fit in that team.
In the Brazil team?
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be like, I think we'd take him in the USA team, certainly. I bet England might even consider him. He'd be a weird fit, though, given that he is Brazilian. So excellent point. Well made, as ever.
Yeah. But what I would say is I agree with your analysis way over mine, but I have this niggling concern.
Look, anytime someone says we'll triple or quadruple your wages,
yeah,
you're going to think about that. And he does have an agent who is agenty. So we'd have to see. Let me ask you this.
And to complete that point just before, I think they'll have to be willing to pay him more than Saliba, or I think you're back to that irritation he will have about whether he is loved and respected to the level he needs to be, especially with Saliba coming back in for another contract after that. So it's getting expensive for the club. So I very much think they should do it and need to do it. I think his nose will be well out of joint if they don't top where Saliba's at the moment, knowing that Saliba's coming back in over the top of it again. So, yikes.
Yeah. Well, the next contract always sets the bar for the player who's going to be negotiating next, right? So they can help each other. If Gabriel can get a little more than Saliba makes now, Saliba can point to Gabriel and say, that sets the bar for me for my next one. I guess there are going to be people, though, that wonder this. And while I don't necessarily think this is the right way to look at it, it's at least worth asking. Let's say Saudi not only offered to triple or quadruple Gabriel's wages, but said, hey, Arsenal has 125 million on, something ridiculous. I've always maintained that every player has a price at which a sale makes sense. I've sort of started to change my tune on that only because at some level you have to be able to replace the player. But is there, of course there is a number. Let me say this to make it a little more complex. Can you see a world where the fees the Saudis would reasonably offer makes sense for Arsenal to move on from Gabriel and use those resources in another way?
Yeah, but I'll lean back to what you said, which is it kind of makes sense that there's a price you should take the money and go and do something clever. But, and it's a massive asterisk, if that is only the case if you have the confidence that your organization or your club has the ability to get out in the market and use that money to its full extent. And there's a lot in that, because it's not just, I'll take it's the Gareth Bale thing. They sold him and they bought 6 schlubs. Now, maybe one of the guys wasn't a schlub, but 5 of them were basically schlubs. So having the money, buying the players, and like many of the players are reasonably well rated before they came into Tottenham. So you're taking something that works, something that's bigger than the sum of the two parts with Saliba and Gabriel and our team in the back line. It didn't necessarily ought to have to work, right? And one of the reasons he's worth a huge amount of money is because of how that partnership has worked and how that area of the team has worked. And when it comes back the other way and they say, okay, here's your 100 million, you then have to go out and spend it, not just on players who are worth the money you then spend on them, but on your making sure you don't flub it, right? Because there's always a risk. You sign a player, you just don't know how it's going to work out. If
Yeah.
he changes leagues, you don't know. If he was successful at one team versus his head, there's so many things you don't know. So when you have something that the bar to sell a player in a position who's looking world class, in a partnership that looks world class, in a defense that works world class, what I think it's a very American sports thing, and like this could be completely wrong, and it's my ignorance of American sports, which I've worked very hard on to maintain. That your guys are a bit more plug and play. You bring in you can compare wide receivers, you compare this, compare that, compare the other. Basketball, there's a lot of look. There are some they're exceptional athletes, but it's a lot more. To me, it seems a lot more plug and play for many players. So a guy is now suddenly worth 100 million, and you know what you're going to get with those other players. You kind of the more pieces to the jigsaw. That's what it feels to me. Football's just closer to a mix of art and science. That there's so much pitch, so much space, so much of it is without the ball, so much of it is kind of the psychology of a team off a long season. Now, again, it's probably my ignorance of American sports. I just think it's very, very easy to sell a Gareth Bale and sign six schlabos. That's
Yeah.
what I think.
Well, so a few things. First of all, I think selling Gabriel Magalhães could have negative knock-on effects for your other superstar in William Saliba, who seems to really enjoy playing with him. That partnership really works. It is the perfect amalgam of qualities to create a strong central defensive partnership. I think central defenses are so defined by partnerships, and this one really works. And if Gabriel were to go, maybe Saliba suddenly says, you know what, I don't need a new contract. I'm going to go too. So there's that concern. So do you lose both by losing one? The other thing I would say is, look, if Ben White was left-footed, if Calafiori was more convincing as a defender, if Ethan Nwaneri was a center back, and you said, we have a tailor-made solution for left center back in the squad, and we can use the 100 million pounds we think we can get to get an Isak who we can't get otherwise, or to do Adam Wharton and Isak, an insanity, something that potentially sets you up to be a super team for years, then I think you have to consider it. The problem is if you get 100 million for Gabriel, you could spend 75 million of it trying to replace him.
Yep.
And not replace him effectively and not find the right partner for Saliba and then wind up losing Saliba. So I think you don't net out enough money. Like I said, again, if Ethan was a center back, if Ben White was a left center back, if Calafiori was more convincing as center back, as a defender, you might say, we have within our squad a player we think can approximate what Gabby does, and we can use that 100 million entirely on an area of need that moves the needle more than center back. But because we'd probably have to use 60, 65, 70, 75 million of the Gabby fee to replace him with who knows what are you netting out? 10 or 15 million extra pounds that you can go apply to something else? Doesn't make sense to me. Wouldn't do it. So I think we can move on. Does that sound good?
It does. I think you nailed it. I think the times when it's just a slam dunk is when you are fortunate enough, and you see it occasionally at teams, when the guy coming through behind them is already pushing the guy who's basically kind of world class. And you're like, well, actually, we're going to lose one of these guys or the other. Let's sell the guy who's like 26, 27, prime, and Real Madrid want to come in from, because we got the guy who's 23, 24, who's already proving his stuff. And like that's the dream you're looking for, right? The guy who's already proving it at your club, and you're making space for him. And then you go and spend that money and you go and buy. Look, if you said, do we do it to get Isak? I think certain players, you have a high level of confidence it's going to hit, and that they're a game changer for us. But to your point, we have a whole lot of replacing to do with Gabriel. So, um, it, how good are we at executing is the question, right? And I think we're pretty good, but we're also hit and miss, right?
Yeah.
And
Look, go
and
ahead,
if
sir.
that's who you are, then that's a hell of a risk to take the money and say, oh, we'll just replace him and use the excess to go and do something brilliant. I think I'm not being down on the club. I think most clubs can't look at themselves and say, we will take this 100 million and execute perfectly. Sometimes the player you're going for solves that problem. If it's Isak and he stays fit, solves the problem for you and your recruitment.
Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. Big money transfers are mostly a coin flip. They're 50-50.
Yeah.
The player you already have is 100%.
Yep.
Gabriel Magalhães is a good player, period. We have him. You sell him and you replace him with someone that's 50-50, yeah, you could be a lot worse off. So none of this makes sense to me from a sell standpoint. I don't think he will go, but I do think he needs a new contract this summer, which leads to the summer in general. And I guess it's as good a time as any to ask about the summer, which is simply, what do you regard as non-negotiables for this summer in terms of what we have to get done? If I said to you, these are the moves, these are the positions we must acquire, and if we don't, you're willing to come on this podcast and say the summer fell short, the summer was a failure. I don't need the names, but I need the positions. What positions do you regard as totally non-negotiable, must add this summer for the summer to be regarded as remotely successful?
I'll use names because they're useful for me in terms of not just a position, but a kind of a player that has knock-on effects. The Zubimendi one, I totally get the Zubimendi one and that style of player, and the fact that we're serious about him. I think Zubimendi or something highly equivalent is an absolute must-do. We'll lose. I assume we'll lose Thomas Partey. I assume we'll lose Jorginho. But you know, whether you'd get 2 seasons like that from Thomas Partey, whether he's your cup of tea or not, I don't know. This will be the first time we got this kind of a season from him, I think, in its entirety. I think I saw a stat saying he was super close to hitting his top minutes ever at Atletico Madrid in terms of equivalence this season at Arsenal. A few more games and like he's there. So this is, and to be honest, it took him a while to get there this season. Half his season wasn't that great. It was just kind of on the build. So we got a big hole at DM if it's not going to be Declan Rice. And Declan Rice is starting to flourish. I've been skeptical about Declan Rice as a left eight in terms of getting to the kind of level that warrants being a 100 million player. But I think in particular, over the last few games in this tough patch, I think he's started to play at levels that make me totally okay with him being our left eight or being our starting left eight, if that's where we get. So he's another guy who has levels in him that I should never have doubted. But I feel like he's getting to that. So I think our midfield starters would be pretty set at that point. I think it all comes down to the attack. If we hold our defense, the players we have defensively, I think we've got enough. Obviously, we need. I won't bore us getting into the mundane stuff of talking about backup players. I'll bore us talking about starting players. It's all about the attack, right? So the first 2 moves are super easy. Zubimendi and the striker we're looking for, if that's Sesko. The only reason I don't want Sesko is nobody's going to say his name the same way.
Sheshko.
I don't want to
You got to
say
use
Sheshko.
that Sean Connery accent.
Yeah. And, I might just annoy people by saying Seshko or Shesko.
Sheshko.
Pick one or the other. Or I might just go with Sesko. So, like, those 2 are easy. Whether those are the end players or not, we know what I mean when I say that. So now you're down to the wingers, and you got, what's Nwaneri going to be? I think we need 2 wingers.
2.
I mean, we're pretty close to that, aren't we?
I think one's fine.
Martinelli. You reckon?
Well, so let's put it this way. I think the top clubs have 6 attackers, right? And if you list out our attackers, and again, I'm going to include Jesus in this for demonstration purposes only, but just hear me out. Ethan, Saka, Kai, Jesus, Martinelli, Leo, 6 attackers, right? Jesus doesn't count, but we're going to get a striker. So we're back to 6. If we lose Leo, you buy a winger, you're back to 6. And if your rotations are starting new left winger and Martinelli backing him up, starting new striker and Kai backing him up, Bukayo Saka and Ethan backing him up, to me, that's a hell of a group of attacking talent. And I think going beyond that is probably leaving somebody out in the cold, barring the fact that we lose all our forwards again to injury next season.
Yeah, I think you're right. I guess my thinking is we're not yet convinced on Martinelli or Trossard.
Well, if Trossard goes and let's say we buy an elite left winger, a player we think is an elite left winger.
Yep.
I am sold on Martinelli as the guy who is competing for a left wing spot, but I'm not sold on Martinelli as the guy who starts 38 games at left wing. You know what I mean?
He hasn't done enough for us to say, okay, well, no question there. And we can't skip another season of not having that. And then it comes down to who's Saka's backup. Will it be Nwaneri? Obviously, he's perfectly great and good. But I kind of said this over the New Year's period.
Raheem Sterling, make that move permanent, you think?
Yeah. So when we're talking about it over the holidays and the transfer window, I was like, why don't we? Why is there not a young guy coming off the bench in the kind of the Garnacho mode that you see maybe a United, that player when he first arrived, right? And that player was also, look, we've had Saka, but behind Saka, where's that next guy coming through pushing? Now maybe that does turn out to be Nwaneri, but then you need backup for Martin Odegaard. So I just think there's space there, not for a top line player, but for one more young player coming through who's ready to push the guys in the front six. Because a couple of injuries and you're down to Martinelli and Trossard on the wings. And it hasn't been enough this season when we've had them.
I agree with you. I guess I would just say, like, if you look around the league at teams that we consider stocked in attack, you look at like a Liverpool, and it's Diaz, Jota, Gakpo, Nunez, Salah, and I don't know, Harvey Elliott. Is that, it's point is it's basically it's basically 5 or 6 kind of guys. So yeah, look, it's a long way of saying this. I think we have to answer my own question. I think we have to get a central midfielder to replace Partey and Jorginho. I think we have to get a winger, and I think we have to get a striker. If we got those 3, I would say that is the minimum bar where I will say we did the work that was necessary to be ready going into the season. And by the way, I would say getting that winger probably for me means Leo moves on. I should say that because I don't know if we go wide forward if we keep Leo and Martinelli, but set that aside for a second. Then you get into the realm of what do I really think we need? I think we need those 3 plus a midfielder who operates in the more attacking zones, a playmaker, a proper partner for Odegaard in the creativity realm. And maybe that's Vieira coming back and fighting for his place again, but my guess is he will move on. So I would like someone who plays in the half space, top of the box, edge of the box, that kind of player for the left-hand side. Now, and maybe it's a wing fielder.
Can't that be Nwaneri? I mean, give me the choice between...
But can it be Nwaneri on the left?
Vieira.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, why not?
Let me say this. Maybe it's a wing fielder. So maybe it's, for example, I'll just throw a name out there as an example. Maybe it's Cunha. And you look at Cunha as someone who can play as our left wing or play as our left 8, right? As more of a 10. Maybe it's a wing fielder. It's a player who could play with Martinelli or instead of Martinelli. And maybe that sort of solves that problem. Wing fielder?
Yeah.
And I got it from Clive, like everything good that I say. Mm-hmm. But I think it's clever, so I'm going to use it. And had you not said anything, I could have just owned it. People would have said, that Elliot, his football knowledge is expanded. But now no one's going to think that. Which, to be fair, we don't believe in false advertising here, so it's fine. So yeah, I would say that that's a need. The one other thing I'd throw out there is I do think a center back is an interesting question. The way I look at our center back partnerships right now, Ben White is probably the Saliba backup. But who is the Gabriel backup? Is it
probably
Calafiori? And do we feel good about it? Or is it Timber? I mean, we know he doesn't want to play a right footer on the left center back position if he can avoid it. So a left-footed left center back, like a left-footed center back, probably would be a nice thing to add. I mean, can you go get the next Kivior, right? A guy you take a relatively cheap shot at and hope that they've got something to them. I will say it's a shame that Aiden Heaven, for example, and I think he's actually a right footer, is he, or is he a left footer? Where's he play?
I think he's right.
He plays on the left side, doesn't he? Moral of the story is I think it's a shame, obviously, we lost him because he might be a player who could start to mix in more for us, but it is what it is. So for me, the must-haves, you got to have a central midfielder, and if it's Zubamendi, fine, although... watch the scouting video, I would say that it's a razor sharp razor close thing for me there, whether I could be really into him or not. Zubamendi, striker, wide forward or wing fielder. I'd love an attacking left eight, and I'd love a center back as an addition there. And we're going to probably get Joan Garcia too, an expensive backup keeper who could be the successor to Raya. So that's a lot of spending in terms of who goes. I think Partey goes. I think Jorginho goes. I think we probably sell Leo. I think Kivior goes. I think Vieira goes. Sambi goes. Neto, obviously, we don't renew. Sterling goes. I think you're looking at Carl Hein probably goes. So maybe even need a third keeper. It's a
amazing
very,
how
very
much.
busy summer. Do you think that Andrea Berta coming in now will get enough of an understanding of the landscape to be prepared to do all this business? Because it's a lot of business to do in one window.
I hope he brought his like big books and folders from his club. So, it is actually, where is it in the planning cycle? It's probably about the right time to come in. I think if I remember that master class that Monchi had on the internet, now is around the time they start the planning for the summer. So it's probably perfect timing to come in.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a very busy summer. I think one of the things that is going to be interesting is tracking the progression of our young talent. And so Max Dowman, maybe, I mean, not going to be a first team player next season, but does he get on a bench? Does he get in a Carabao Cup game? That'll be interesting. But the ones that are most interesting, of course, are Ethan and Miles Lewis-Skelly. Maybe Ethan Ranieri does play more in the advanced midfield role next season, or he's playing, giving Bukayo Saka the chance to rest more, which would be great. Miles Lewis-Skelly is a
That wouldn't
player.
be enough, though. So to your point, I don't think like Saka is still going to want to play all the games. Now we'll rest him a little more. And Nwaneri can definitely step in, but it won't actually now be enough for him, will it? And if Odegaard's fit and firing, he plays almost all the games. So we really will need somewhere else than filling in for Saka and Odegaard, I think, for Nwaneri not to be very, very frustrated next season and not to feel like it's a step back. Don't you think? I really think we got to make a role from where he gets more games, and that could be the left eight.
It's so hard to know because I think Bukayo Saka is coming off major hamstring surgery, and it may be
Sure.
the case that we want to be careful with him. And so if Saka plays 70 minutes of games, and if we're winning games, I think we're going to be very good again next season. And he plays 20 in Premier Leagues, and he plays maybe he starts Champions League games against the lesser Champions League teams. We've seen this season that the league phase is grueling, that you don't have to get off to a hot start to do well in it, and that doing well in it doesn't even necessarily guarantee you an easy passage through, as Liverpool found. So maybe we'll be more rotational there. I think he can play FA Cup, he can play League Cup. First half of the season, I don't think we'll have trouble getting him minutes. Where he is in his development for the second half of the season is another question. Mikel has also said that Miles Lewis-Skelly could play 6 and 8. Calafiori wasn't bought just to be a rotational option. I know you have questions about him defensively, but I think he'll play more. You talk about the left eight for Ethan. I'm kind of fascinated about the left eight for Miles. Do you think next season we could see Miles Lewis-Skelly converted to a midfielder, or is it the case that he's making himself so important as a left back that why would you mess with the success that you've found for him in that position?
I lean that latter direction. I think he's just. I get that he looks like a really good midfielder. I get that he is a converted midfielder to left back, but that's almost the thing, isn't it? It's a lot. If you want to get that inverted left back, the at the levels of a like a Zinchenko or something like that in terms of midfield presence and abilities, you kind of got to take a midfielder who becomes a fullback than a fullback who learns to be a midfielder. Like Ben White, when he steps into midfield, good player and all that, but he's not a midfielder when he gets into midfield. I'd say the same about Timber. Very good, dangerous players in midfield, but they're not midfielders. And that's the beauty of Miles Lewis-Skelly stepping into midfield. I think that's the direction you look for. He's ironically our best 1v1 left full back between him and Calafiori, I would say. The safer option. And he's the natural midfielder. So I do think he's almost the prototype of what you look for in a left back. So and is he the level of midfielder we would want as a a straight up midfielder. I don't know.
Hard to
I
know, right?
suspect he may not
Maybe.
be, but
Maybe. I don't know. I
whereas
don't
I
know.
know, I feel like I know that he's pretty much proved he's at the level to be to play for Arsenal as our inverted left back role. I don't know that he's anywhere near proved that he can play midfield at that level. Albeit I rate him, and he's got skills and he's got ability, and he's shown us bits, but he's shown us bits as a guy who steps into midfield and therefore has a bit of space. He's the free midfielder, so he has more space. So I think he's looked very good in midfield. When you're man marked as somebody like a Declan Rice would be, or a Martin Odegaard, because that's where you stand all game long, and some guys running around behind you, you might look very, very quiet. So
It's tough in a way, right? Because I would almost say one of the things I like about him is he's so strong on the ball. It's hard to take the ball off him. He rides challenges. He's good in tight
yeah,
spaces. Every once in a while, he gets his pocket picked. You get your pocket picked from the left back position, that can be a killer, as we've seen. He got a red card for that reason. You get your pocket picked in midfield every once in a while. It's not the end of the world. That risk reward profile is different. I think he can play there, but I definitely lean right now towards the idea that, look, we love Calafiori. I think he's a special talent, especially with what he can do going forward. If Miles Lewis-Skelly has made himself an undroppable left back, then he's got the first choice left back shirt. And by the way, as we've seen with Ben White and Timber, this is football. Football sometimes is about competing for your place and proving that you deserve the shirt. And I think competition tends to make players better. It gives me no pleasure, Paul, but I think we have to at least touch on this because I think it would be tone deaf not to touch on it. And I don't know if we're the right people to have this conversation, but I want to at least bring it up. Miles Lewis-Skelly showed up for his England call-up. They basically posted a picture on social media of him smiling in clothes and a video of him saying, "What do you want to say to the next person?" And he's like, "Hope you get here safely." And he just seems lovely. And by all accounts, I mean, there's stories coming out that Arsenal think he could be a future captain, that he's loved in the club, that his family, his family support is great. His mom's great. Like, just great guy, big character, big personality, hard worker, lots of confidence.
it's
Great.
fantastic because you kind of feel it's the missing piece, because he's a kid, and like they're kind of mini stars in their own right coming through the academy. So you're like, is he one of the spoiled ones, or we seem to be very good these days at guys keeping their feet on the ground? And
Well, this is where I want to go with this just quickly. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but do you engage at all with the content of it? It breaks my heart because they post that picture, the England national team posts that picture of him arriving for England duty. And there's just endless comments of he's a see you next Tuesday, entitled prick. You can just tell he's a jerk. You can just tell he has a bad attitude. All of this stuff just demeaning him as a person. And everybody is going to obviously have their argument for what it is. I mean, I will confess, and maybe it's because of where I live and the culture that I've been brought up in, that my mind goes to race and to racial bias. And if not racism overtly, then certainly racial bias and a racial animus that operates in an unconscious bias way. I know there are people that are going to roll their eyes out of their head and say, why do you have to go there? I could absolutely be wrong. I'm only telling you, I don't know what it is about a picture of a smiling 18-year-old that leads people to say that. Maybe it's pure tribalism. Maybe people were so mad that he made fun of an Erling Haaland celebration. I mean, Vardy does this and people love the guy. Like, so I have a hard time going to another place, but like, let me ask it to you this way, in a way that's maybe a little bit less polarizing and divisive, is to simply say, are you surprised that he has engendered such a strong negative impression from fans outside the club? And do you see any parallels with some of the other young, and I have to say particularly Black young England players that have struggled with similar coverage? Or are you just trying to avoid that, not engage with it at all?
I in large part ignore it because I just think it needs to be built into us early on when we raise our next generations, that there's a way to understand social media, which is it's best to picture it as 95% fucking idiot teens.
Trolls, idiots,
Yeah.
teens, people who are literally just trying to rage bait, algorithm promoting that shit. Look, you're absolutely right about that. You are going to see the worst of the worst of the worst of humanity gets the most visibility on those platforms.
Yeah. And the older you get, the less you care. about everything in life. So it's easier for me to say that now than it would have been 10, 20, or if they'd had this shit 30 years ago.
All anyone has to do is roll back 8 years and listen to us talk about Arsenal to understand how much
Yeah.
how angry you can get about shit sometimes at each other.
So it's a process, but that's where I'm at the moment. That's not necessarily where the rest of the planet's at. I'll tell you what, I am surprised. I knew that Saka was a special one, right?
Mhm.
And because he was well treated, I think there was the whole penalty issue. Don't get me wrong, but I think relative to how players of from where he's from and how he looks have been treated in the past, I think I thought he was a special one in terms of how he carries himself, and that's not to say everybody should be like him, or that there's anything wrong with anybody who can't project that particular Saka quality that makes you an absolute fucking douche if you
Mhm.
have a problem with Bukayo Saka. I mean, he's almost a litmus test for are you a troll or not, because there's absolutely nothing you should say about it. And the problem with Bukayo Saka is the next guy who comes through, Miles Lewis Skelly, is every bit, from what we can tell, as good a guy, but he doesn't have the special Saka-ness that is like pure than pure, better than better. He's just an ordinary good kid. And so I'm surprised we're right back to where we were before, where they went after these other guys before. It's just there's a low quality out there. There's a low quality in people that can be stirred up for very little. And yeah, it's kind of a bit of a shock to the system that nothing's really changed just because. Now, I'm for all the people thinking, but all the shit Bukayo Saka got, like I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying he had a special quality and still does that I think is kind of a shield against some of the worst excesses, even though when they get their chance, they take it. So every now and then we'll see the worst of the worst going after Saka, probably because you build him up enough. They're, that's the one they really want to take down. They just love something to have on Saka.
Yeah,
I don't think he'll ever give it to them.
and I think the one thing that social media does also, and we should point this out, is the phenomenon of England posts picture of happy young person.
Yeah.
Obvious racist troll posts something obviously racist and obnoxious under it. All Arsenal fans quote post it saying, "Can you believe this jerk?" Right? But like that actually boosts it and gets it in front of more eyeballs. And it almost sort of reminds me of these crappy troll bait, viral overlap videos or things like that, which is they get us because they get one person upset. That person quotes it to say how upset they are by it. And that's how people come into contact with it. So you got
And
to
then
starve this stuff of
people of
oxygen more
some,
than anything.
yeah. Well, the problem then, it's a process. The next thing is that people of some status in the game or the media comment on it. And it doesn't matter what they say, it'll never be right for everybody. So now you
Right.
get into the reasonableness debate when you should be having a bloody debate at all. Like the move is to completely ignore the trolls and to completely ignore those guys. But that's never going to happen
If
because
that worked, social media would be out of business. But what social media has proven
exactly.
us is that our human nature is that, and they found this, by the way. There's books about this, psychology books and stuff, and tested on social media. The number one emotion that provokes reaction more than any other emotion is anger, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate, but that's who we are. So yeah,
Also
look,
the fastest of emotions.
yeah, the
So
quickest to
yeah.
process. And I would simply say this. Maybe the right thing is just to say we love Miles Lewis Skelly. We can see he's a wonderful young man. We can see he's a wonderful player. We back him and support him and give him our love and support. And instead of focusing our attention on what hopefully, despite what the algorithms would suggest to us, is a small subset of knuckle dragging trolls,
Hey, even
we
if it's a large majority of knuckle dragging trolls, it's knuckle dragging trolls,
yeah,
and
and we're not
that's
going to give
what
them the time of day. Yeah.
and it's a barbell thing. There's
Mhm.
ordinary, reasonable people, and there's those trolls, be they 14 or just 50-year-olds who are still trapped in a 14-year-old mindset.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in the middle. There's reasonable people and there's those fucking lunatics. And it doesn't matter if it's half the world or a quarter. Don't call them anything fans. Don't call them City fans. Don't call them Arsenal. Don't call them anything fans. They're
Mhm.
trolls who want a team to get to support or whatever, so they can come to the party and screw things up for everybody.
Yeah. Maybe social media was just a mistake. So it is what it is. I guess the only reason I bring it up is because I know that there have been a lot of people reaching out, to me on email and on private messaging and just on social media, and people that are genuinely upset about this sort of reaction to him. But maybe that's the whole thing, is that the reaction only matters if you make it matter. So we'll do our best, like I said, to focus on the love and support we give him and Ethan and Saka, and by the way, Declan Rice and Ben White and all of our players. And we stand by them and we support them. So I did want to ask you something that I think is kind of interesting that came up. So I did a statements pod with Andrew, which is a patron pod that he does. We have to agree or strongly agree or disagree or strongly disagree.
Andrew had you on, did he?
He did. He has me on the ones that I think are the lowest listenership, just to protect his brand as much as possible. But then I go on there and I try to say stuff that can have escape velocity and get into the ether and ultimately destroy his brand nonetheless. It's my devious plan to destroy the man I love. What I would say is, one of the topics that came up was really interesting to me, and I feel pretty strongly about this, and I want to see where you are. It was a question about who will be the favorites next season to win the Premier League. And Paul, I am here to tell you, I think Arsenal are the resounding, clear favorites, and I predict will be the betting market favorites to win the Premier League going into next season. And I don't know that it'll be even that close.
Are you serious?
And I'm wondering how you
betting
feel
market favorites.
We were betting market favorites going into this season, if you can.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
I think we'll be the betting market favorites by a bigger distance going into next season than we were going into this season. What's your take on that?
I think you're an absolute fool, Elliot. Can I go heavy on this one?
I may be, but am I right?
No, you're a moron. You're an
Good. Let's
imbecile.
get into this, because I feel strongly about this. Why do you disagree?
Well, recency bias. And anybody who's watched games this season, people are terrible for compensating for the fact that you're missing players. It's almost like people are absolutely terrible at assessing fat tail risk, big things that might happen but rarely do. They just can't, although they know it exists, they can't.
Okay, so let me ask you a different question then, because what you're saying is more just the wisdom of the crowds doesn't work. People are idiots. I think the betting market's pretty sharp for what it's worth. But I will ask you this: if you worked at Pinnacle Sports or whatever, you worked at a betting market and you had to set the lines, would you set Arsenal as the betting favorite to win next season's Premier League going into next season?
Well, I think they factor in what they think people will vote or pick.
Sure, but I'm asking what you believe. Do you believe we should be favorites going into next season?
Which is, do I think we should be favorites? No. I think we should be damn close.
Who do you have ahead of us? City? It's not that easy, is it?
It's not easy. I think it's so close it doesn't matter. That's what I think.
You think it's City, Liverpool, and Arsenal in a cluster?
Yeah, and it's there's a certain point at which it's meaningless to say, I think, like, if it's 33, 34, 33, who cares? If it's even 37, 32, 30.
So you're saying those three teams going into next season are going to be essentially equivalent?
Yeah.
So can I throw something at you? What if I told you Salah, Van Dijk, and Trent all leave Liverpool this summer?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If you told me they didn't, I'd say they were favorites.
So it's interesting, right? I guess this is what's tough. I would be willing to take a pretty decent wager that if Salah stays next season and Van Dijk and Trent go, and as it stands right now, if I had to bet, that would be the outcome I'd bet on, that they keep Salah and Van Dijk and Trent go. If that were to happen, I think there's a decent chance Salah does not have another season at this level in him. And if he does try to play through another season like that, then maybe he could miss some time for injury. And I think it's an AFCON season. I could be making that up. Are they still every 2 years? Someone will have to look that up, but that's beside the point. I think losing Van Dijk and losing Trent and Salah going into a season where maybe he ages out of his absolute peak, I think they'd be in a tough spot. City have like 8 guys over 30 they got to replace. De Bruyne is done. Rodri's coming back from knee construction at 29 years old. All their other major players are 30. Their backline needs to be reworked. And they've got the FIFA Club World Cup in the summer. So they're going to be playing meaningful football in July in the United
Oh,
States in
you've
95
really
degree
done your
weather.
homework on this.
Yeah, I look at it and I say, okay, Arsenal with Bukayo back and Kai back and a new striker and a new central midfielder instead of Partey and Jorginho and a new winger and all of our players back and raring to go and Ethan and Miles a year older, like having finished second with basically no players left. Yeah, I think we'd be favorites. And I'd have to say, barring injury, if we don't do it next season, then I'd be really concerned because I think there's a chance that this is the crest of the wave and that the wave maybe crashes on this era for them after this season. I think you're already seeing that wave starting to crash, but they built themselves up a cushion that I don't think will be catchable. And I think City are in a rebuild mode. And I don't think any of the other teams have their shit together at all. So, yeah, Paul, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I'd have us as a pretty healthy favorite, especially if we get this summer right. Cue a summer where we buy 3 left backs and nothing else.
And the reason I would think it's much more even is I just think City will either get it right or wrong. And if they get it right, it's a bit binary. They will spend the money, they will get the players, they will be rejuvenated. It'll take them a little while, but they'll be there in the run in next season. I think by the end of that season, they'll be humming. He'll have the players he wants and he'll have done a redo. And so I think they'll be strong. I think there's a good chance 2 of the 3 for Liverpool re-sign.
So you think Van Dijk and Salah stay?
Yeah, and they got this summer coming, and they'll make their moves, and they have Michael Edwards back, and they have some moves planned, and I think they'll be at least as strong and maybe stronger. They'll have the forward momentum, and they'll have their way of playing sorted out. And we have a lot to prove to ourselves. We've fallen off, I think, quite a bit this year. Set piece is great. You take that away, we look at a very average team in attack and have done for most of the season. I just think we've some steps up to make, and now I believe we'll make them. We have you listed off a huge amount of business to do in the summer when you go through it. So get our players back. Hope they stay fit and healthy for the next season. Just hope it was a one-off that a number of players had. I just think there's so much uncertainty there for us. We're nowhere near the level this year. Like we're second in the league this season, but it's not like second last season, or maybe even the second the season before in terms of the levels we were beginning to get towards as the season went on. And I know we're missing players, but it's been a while. Martin Odegaard isn't at the same level. There's a lot to prove. You can't just assume we go back to that level and we bring it. I liked our summer signings. It wasn't a perfect summer. I thought we were going to be this. That should have strengthened our team going into the season. That was stronger than last season, but
marginally stronger.
Marginally.
And the problem is we strengthened in places, and this would be my argument with Mikel and with the summer we had. We strengthened in places that tactically reinforce our game model. But we didn't strengthen in high leverage, make a difference places. And what I mean by that is,
I agree.
Yeah, Marino could have added dual winning rotational option in midfield. And yeah, Calafiori adds a little bit more final third presence from the left back position. That's all well and good. But what about like a true proper 20 goal striker? Yeah, nothing's going to move the needle like that. You know what I mean?
Sure. And of course we would have done it if we could, right?
Yeah. I'm not saying we didn't want to, but we didn't.
So given that, I thought it was perfectly reasonable, to your point, to take last season and say, well, if we hadn't been so tired at certain points in that season, there's 6 points more. How many times do we say, well, if we hadn't had this result when we didn't show up, especially in the first half of the season and then over the Christmas break, and then we got rejuvenated after Dubai. And it's like, well, if we just shore this up, have a couple more stronger players who you're happy to start, not just come off the bench when you're in trouble. That should take us up another half level, maybe not the full level of the killer player you're looking for as an option at left 8 or as striker. But if we could have got them last summer, great. But this should have made us stronger. and we're a ways off in my book. So
So I
we have a
don't look at.
step up to take.
I don't disagree with you. I think we have, as a fan base, probably, and this is, I absolutely hate the word excuse, because what people call an excuse is
Reasons. How
actually
about
is a
reasons?
reason, just a reason,
Yeah,
right?
reasons.
I think we as a fan base have done a shit job really examining what these injuries have cost us
Yeah.
and how we are performing in the absence of them. And I just cannot say this enough times. If Liverpool lost Salah, Gravenberch, and McAllister, or Salah, Gravenberch, and Luis Diaz for 4 months, they would be nowhere near where they are now. If they lost players of the importance that we have lost, we lost our Salah in Saka, and we lost our Trent in Odegaard, so to speak, and he hasn't come back and been anywhere near the same. So I would just simply say the injuries have hurt us to an extent that I think maybe with the benefit of a little distance and hindsight, we will appreciate it more. It may be the kind of thing where by the end of the season, when Saka is back all the way fit and playing regularly, even though we won't have Kai back, but we're playing Saka, just Saka alone, that will go, gosh, we're really good, aren't we? We could have been really, really good. I don't think we will appreciate that enough until the time comes. I would say that if you look at it, I mean, this is why age curves are so crazy, right? They're a curve, they're a distribution. They're not going to tell you about an individual, because Raheem Sterling is 3.5 years younger, or whatever it is, than Mohamed Salah. Leo Trossard is a few days older than Raheem Sterling, and Raheem Sterling can't play hardly at all.
We are really coming to the same place on these age curves, aren't we? You and
Yeah,
I.
we are. But what I
We're
would
not
say
so
is
different.
there is the thing about age curves, though, is that I think they can hit like cliffs. Look at Sterling, for example, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It came like a cliff. Virgil van Dijk turns 34 this summer, and Salah turns 33. So if they don't leave and Liverpool ties them down to deals again and
I hope
doesn't
they
replace,
stay.
yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that, sure, they might have another season at the top and we could look silly saying that, or the age curve could come for them. They could have an injury hit season. They could miss them. They didn't replace them. And suddenly they're in a really bad spot. And then you look at City. How about this for City? Kyle Walker, done. Gundogan, done. De Bruyne, done. I think Ortega and Ederson are both probably done and need to be replaced. Kovacic, just about done. John Stones, just about done. Bernardo Silva, just about done. Nathan Ake is 30. Akanji is turning 30. Rodri is 29, about to be 29, coming off an ACL. And I'm not totally convinced about Kusanov or whatever, who they just signed. We'll have to see how Nico Gonzalez turns out for them, the Spanish midfielder they got from Porto. Guardiola looks pretty good, but Doku's not the answer. Savinho is not the answer in my mind. Foden is having a down season. They have a lot of work to do to figure out who they're going to be going forward. And oh, by the way, does Pep have it in him still to build another project? Like, there's a lot of question marks about City's future and
They're
a lot to
definitely
replace, and they
third
have to
favorite.
play in the
Yeah.
summer. And there's a lot of question marks about Liverpool and their generational 3 talismanic players coming to the end of their career or leaving. And you look at Arsenal sitting here with a core of players who are all just hitting their mid-prime, who should all be back for next season, plus a reinforced team. I think will be favorites going into next season, but that's next season. So I think we can finish off on one more topic. What do you think is, all right, so we play Fulham and Everton before the Real Madrid tie.
Mm-hmm.
What are the goals of those games in the context of what do you want to figure out before we face Real Madrid? What do you think are the positional lineup oriented questions that Mikel needs to have answered clearly in his head going into that tie? Because I think we have seen, when we've had some injuries in European competitions, we've had to do some wacky things. Who doesn't forget, like, didn't Emil Smith Rowe start false 9 against, was that against Unai's Villarreal team, I want to say, in the Europa League? I guess my point is,
So.
he's going to have to galaxy brain something because he won't have a striker. It might just be Mikel Merino. He's going to have to decide if Bukayo Saka can play in the tie. What are the questions you think need to be answered between the Fulham and the Everton game to be ready to face Madrid?
I think he's going to persist with Merino as striker. I think his interesting questions are what he does. I'm going to assume Nwaneri starts to come back in as the right wing, that he's really kind of been resting him up because he overplayed him as a younger kid in the games leading up to it, and he was due a breather. So, Partey, Rice, Odegaard in midfield, left back is a huge decision because you're going to be up against world-class wingers. And I personally think it's easy that you got to go with Miles Lewis-Skelly and have Calafiori, the bench option, to make a difference after 70 minutes when they've got used to one way of us playing, then face a different way of us playing. So I don't know that I would say he doesn't have that many choices to make or things to try out at this stage. I think obviously he's got Martinelli and he's got Trossard to come back into things. So there's going to be a certain Trossard's already here, but Martinelli's going to come back into the mix. So he could do something wacky with Martinelli in terms of Martinelli comes off the bench, and when he comes off after 70 minutes, thinking of Real Madrid games, he may come on. Doesn't matter when he comes on as a winger. He does a lot of running through the middle because that's something they won't have seen for 70 minutes in the game. But I think we lean into a game which Mikel Merino doesn't rotate. I think that's the one thing. There's a few things. He doesn't press, or we can't really press with him. And he doesn't really rotate with wingers. Whereas if you start a Trossard or a Martinelli on the wing, you're going to get more rotation. But I think it's kind of set. He's got to go with Merino, and it'll make us a little more fixed, a little more pragmatic. And I guess overall, the thing I would look for him to do is, does he just become very pragmatic against Real Madrid and we don't really try and play our game?
What does that look like for you?
Sitting deeper, being a little more defensive than we normally would, having short periods where we do press them and we get up the pitch and we get set pieces and corners, but that we don't go all out for any sustained period of time, because we don't have the press up front, and with the high line we'll get fucking killed with our center backs. That's the biggest problem. If I'm Mikel Arteta, I have a team that's set up to play with a high line, but if I do that against Real Madrid, I might get a Bayern outcome, and even more so now because I don't have the press up front. Mm-hmm. So, but we won't see that we're not going to see that in the game against Fulham. So I don't know the next couple of games will tell us too much about how he will attack Real Madrid or defend against Real Madrid. But I think he has to pick stick or twist in terms of how we play. And I don't know how he leans into, we'll just do it the same, but with Mikel Merino up front. I don't think you can sustain that high line against Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. and co. and Bellingham running at our back line with clever balls over the top when we can't press their back line, who's going to be so good at playing it around the back and playing out. So, but I don't think we're going to get that tell in the next couple of games, because those are not games that lend itself to it. I think we got to be much more pragmatic when we play Real Madrid, and kind of try and sucker punch them.
I think a couple obvious things. If Bukayo Saka is fit enough to play any minutes against Fulham and Everton, getting him in for those games to determine what he can give us against Madrid would be huge.
Yeah.
I think another thing that we'd want to see then, if Bukayo Saka can play, or even if he can't, do we want to give some time for a Leo Martinelli Ethan front three versus a Martinelli Leo Merino front three, right? Versus a Martinelli Merino Ethan front three? Like, is he going to want to see different permutations of the front three on the pitch together to try to determine how those relationships work together? I think if we are going to sit,
yeah, I was going to say I expect that to be when we sub, right? We would do that. Except he has a tendency not to want to take Merino off because, you still need somebody to head ball in net, and Mikel's your best man.
Well, but what I would say, I mean, and this thing he won't do, but I probably would. I'd probably even consider a Martinelli Ethan Leo, or Martinelli Leo Saka, or Ethan Saka, whatever the case is, front three, and consider dropping Rice deeper and playing Merino, Odegaard, and Rice, because I think as good as Partey's been this season, do I want Partey flowing back to his goal with the running power that Madrid has in midfield, chasing Bellingham around, or do I want Rice chasing Bellingham around? So if ever there was a time for Rice to maybe play a little deeper and just be protective, it could be that. Now, that could be what you do at the Bernabeu. you do got to go get a goal somewhere. I don't want this going 0-0 in penalties after 90 and 120 minutes. I don't see us winning a penalty shootout against Real Madrid because of, aura.
Yeah.
But lots of good stuff coming up to get you through the interlull. And then we're going to raise some money for a very good cause when we get in April. So, that and the Real Madrid tie, small matter of Real Madrid to look forward to. Lots of good stuff coming up. Paul, always a pleasure, bud. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me everywhere. You know what? We love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10. Fulham, no.